In the winter of 1898, a man walked into a saloon on Front Street in Dawson City, Yukon, dropped a pouch of gold dust on the bar, and ordered every egg in the building. There were 23 eggs. They cost him $46. In today's money, that is nearly $1,800 for 2 dozen eggs. He ate them all, fried, in a single sitting, while the other men in the saloon watched in silence. That man was Swiftwater Bill Gates, and the eggs were for a dance hall girl who had told him she loved eggs more than gold. He bought every egg in town, so nobody else could give her one. Number 22 on this list cost more per plate than a month's rent in Toronto. Number 11 was illegal in 3 countries and served openly in Dawson because there was no law against it yet. And number 1 is a cocktail so disturbing that it is still served today in the same saloon where it was invented, and it contains an actual human body part. These 30 meals were not cooked in ordinary kitchens. They were served in the wildest, richest, most lawless saloons in Canadian history, in a city that went from 500 people to 40,000 in 2 years, where gold dust was currency, and champagne cost more than a horse, and a fried egg was the most expensive luxury a man could buy. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down all 30. Number 30. Sourdough bread with bacon grease. The daily bread of the Klondike. Miners called themselves sourdoughs because they kept a sourdough starter alive through the winter by sleeping with it. The starter lived in a tin or a leather pouch pressed against the body because the cold would kill the yeast if it froze. In the morning, the miner mixed the starter with flour and water, let it rise near the fire, and baked it in a pan. The bread was dense and tangy, and it was eaten with bacon grease spread on top, because butter did not exist in Dawson City in 1897. A loaf of bread in the saloons cost $1.50. In today's money, that is $58 for a loaf of bread. The men who ate it did not complain about the price because complaining about prices in Dawson was like complaining about the cold. Both were facts of life that could not be changed. Number 29. Bacon at $1 a slice. A single strip of bacon in a Dawson saloon cost $1 in 1898. That is $39 in today's money for a strip of bacon. The pork had been shipped by steamboat up the Yukon River from St. Michael, Alaska, a journey of nearly 2,000 miles that took weeks. By the time it reached Dawson, transportation costs had been added to the price of the pig, the cost of the cure, and the cut a saloon owner needed to make a profit, especially when a hungry miner with a pouch of gold dust would pay anything for the taste of something familiar. The bacon was fried in its own fat on a wood stove behind the bar and served on a tin plate without ceremony. Number 28. Flapjacks with molasses. Pancakes made from flour and water with whatever leavening was available, cooked on a griddle and served with blackstrap molasses, because maple syrup was a memory and sugar cost $3 a pound. A stack of 3 flapjacks cost $2 in a Dawson saloon. That is $77 today. The flapjacks were thick and heavy, and they sat in the stomach like ballast, which was exactly what a miner needed before spending 12 hours in a shaft dug into frozen ground. The molasses was dark and bitter, and it had been shipped from the Caribbean to San Francisco to St. Michael to Dawson by a supply chain that stretched across 3 oceans and 2 continents. Number 27. Bean soup. Bean soup was the cheapest meal in Dawson, a bowl of beans boiled in water with salt and whatever dried meat was available. It cost 50 cents, which was still $20 in today's money for a bowl of bean soup. The beans had been packed over the Chilkoot Pass on the backs of men who carried 60 pounds per trip and made 30 trips to get a year's supply of food from the coast to the other side of the mountains. Every bean in that bowl had crossed a mountain pass on a man's back. That is the most expensive bowl of soup in the history of Canadian food, not because of the ingredients, but because of the labor it took to get them there. Number 26. Moose steak. When hunters brought a moose into Dawson, the saloons bought the meat before the blood had dried. A moose steak in a Dawson saloon cost $5 to $8, which is $200 to $300 in today's money. The steak was cut thick, cooked over a wood stove, and served on a tin plate with boiled potatoes. Fresh meat in Dawson was so rare that the arrival of a moose carcass became an event. Men came from the creeks to eat at the saloon that had it. The meat was gone within a day. By the next morning, the saloon was back to beans and bacon, and the miners were back to dreaming about steak. Number 25. Canned oysters. Shipped from the coast in tins, oysters were the luxury food of the Klondike. They arrived months after being packed, often dented and rusty, and they cost $5 a tin. A man who ordered oysters in a Dawson saloon was making a statement. He was saying, "I have enough gold to eat something that does not need to exist here." The oysters were served cold from the tin or fried into an omelet that cost $10 and was the closest thing to fine dining that Dawson offered. The Hangtown fry, an omelet of oysters, bacon, and eggs, had been invented in the California Gold Rush 50 years earlier, and it followed the miners north to the Klondike. In Dawson, a Hangtown fry cost $15. That is nearly $600 today for an omelet. Number 24. Dried apple pie. Apples did not grow in the Yukon. Dried apples were packed in over the passes and sold for $1 a pound. A dried apple pie baked in a saloon kitchen cost $3 a slice. The apples were rehydrated in water, sweetened with whatever sugar was available, and baked in a crust made from lard and flour. The pie tasted nothing like a real apple pie. It tasted like a memory of a real apple pie. And in Dawson City in January, that memory was worth the price. Number 23. Caribou stew. Indigenous hunters and sourdoughs who had been in the Yukon before the rush brought caribou meat into Dawson from herds that migrated through the territory. The stew was chunks of caribou simmered in water with wild onions and potatoes when potatoes were available, which they usually were not. A bowl cost $2 to $3. The meat was lean and gamey, and it tasted like the land, which is to say it tasted like nothing most of the stampeders had ever eaten before. Some loved it. Some could not finish the bowl. All of them ate it because the alternative was another night of beans. Number 22. Champagne at $60 a bottle. The saloons on Front Street served French champagne to any miner who could pay. $60 a bottle in 1898 is over $2,300 in today's money. Wealthy prospectors like Big Alex McDonald and Swiftwater Bill Gates drank it nightly. Gates once filled a bathtub with champagne for a dance hall girl named Gussie L'Amour. The champagne was shipped from France to San Francisco to St. Michael to Dawson by steamboat, and by the time it reached the saloon, it had traveled further than most of the men drinking it. The bottles were opened with a flourish. The foam spilled onto the sawdust floor, and nobody cleaned it up, because cleaning up champagne in Dawson was considered bad luck. Number 21. Hardtack and coffee. Hardtack was a biscuit of flour, water, and salt, baked until it was harder than wood. It lasted years without spoiling, and it was the base ration of every miner who could not afford the saloon prices. Dunked in coffee made from boiled grounds, it softened just enough to chew. The coffee cost 25 cents a cup. The hardtack was sometimes free if the bartender pitied you. A man eating hardtack in a Dawson saloon was a man who had not found gold, and everyone in the room knew it. The sound of hardtack being cracked against a table was the sound of a dream that had not yet come true. Number 20. Pemmican from the indigenous traders. Dried meat pounded to powder and mixed with rendered fat and dried berries, packed into rawhide bags by Han, Tagish, and other indigenous peoples of the Yukon. It was the original survival food of the North, perfected over centuries, and it was sold to the stampeders by indigenous traders who had been making it long before anyone dreamed of gold. A pound of pemmican cost $2. It lasted months. It provided more calories per ounce than any other food available in Dawson. The miners who bought it were buying knowledge that was thousands of years old. Most of them did not realize that. Most of them just knew it kept them alive. Number 19. Whiskey $1 a shot in Dawson, the standard drink of the Klondike. Whiskey flowed through Dawson the way the Yukon River flowed past it, constantly and without interruption. The saloons were open 24 hours a day, and whiskey was poured around the clock. $1 a shot in 1898 is $39 in today's money. Most of the whiskey was rot gut, distilled from anything fermentable and cut with water, sometimes flavored with tobacco juice or red pepper to give it bite. The good whiskey, when it arrived by steamboat, cost $3 a shot. The miners drank both without distinction because by midnight, in a Dawson saloon, the difference between good whiskey and bad whiskey was a philosophical question that nobody was sober enough to answer. Number 18. Fresh eggs at $2 each. Eggies were the gold of the kitchen. A single egg in Dawson City in the winter of 1898 cost $2. That is $77 in today's money for one egg. Hens could not survive the Yukon winter, so every egg that reached Dawson had been shipped from the outside, packed in sawdust and straw, and carried over the mountains. Many broke on the journey. The ones that survived were sold at auction. A fried egg in a saloon was a $5 breakfast. A 2-egg omelet was a $10 luxury. Swiftwater Bill Gates bought every egg in Dawson on multiple occasions, sometimes to impress a woman, sometimes just because he could. The egg in the Klondike was not food. It was status. Number 17. Ptarmigan roasted on a spit. The willow ptarmigan, a grouse-like bird native to the Yukon, was hunted by indigenous peoples and sourdoughs alike. When a hunter brought ptarmigan into Dawson, the saloon roasted them on a spit over the wood stove and served them whole on tin plates. A single bird cost $3. The meat was white and delicate, and it tasted like the tundra, clean and cold and slightly sweet. For miners who had been eating beans and bacon for months, a roasted ptarmigan was the closest thing to a Christmas dinner that the Klondike could offer. Number 16. Hoochinu, a homebrewed liquor made by the Tlingit people of Alaska from a mixture of fermented molasses, berries, and flour, distilled through a makeshift still. The name was shortened to hooch and entered the English language permanently. In the saloons of Dawson, Hoochinu was the cheap alternative to whiskey, and it was considerably more dangerous. A glass cost 50 cents. The taste was reportedly somewhere between turpentine and regret. Men who drank too much of it went blind temporarily, and those who drank it regularly developed problems that the Dawson doctors could not explain, and did not try to. First pattern break. Here is what most people do not understand about Dawson City in 1898. It was the largest city west of Winnipeg and north of Seattle. 40,000 people in a city made of wood and canvas on a frozen riverbank, in a territory that had no roads, no railway, and no telegraph. Every item of food, every bottle of liquor, every sack of flour, every tin of beans had to be carried over mountain passes or shipped by steamboat up 2,000 miles of river. The cost of transportation was built into the price of everything. A dozen eggs that cost 15 cents in San Francisco cost $24 in Dawson. A 50-pound sack of flour that cost $2 in Seattle cost $25 in Dawson. The saloons were not expensive because the owners were greedy. They were expensive because the city existed in a place where nothing grew, nothing could be farmed, and everything had to come from somewhere else. The meals on this list are not wild because of what they contained. They are wild because of what it cost to get the ingredients to a place that had no business being a city at all. Number 15. Canned milk in coffee. Fresh milk was impossible. Canned condensed milk shipped in tins from the South was the only option. A tin of Carnation or Eagle brand cost $1.50 in Dawson. A splash of it in coffee turned the bitter, overboiled brew into something almost civilized. The dance hall girls drank their coffee with canned milk. The gamblers drank theirs black. The distinction was noted by everyone and commented on by no one. Number 14. Sourdough donuts fried in bear fat. When a saloon cook got hold of sugar and bear fat at the same time, donuts happened. Sourdough batter was twisted into rings, then dropped into hot rendered bear fat and fried until golden. They were rolled in sugar while still hot and sold at the bar for $1 each. A miner who walked into a saloon and smelled donuts frying in bear fat would pay anything for one. It was the smell of home, the smell of a kitchen that existed 1,000 miles south and a lifetime away. The donut was gone in 4 bites. The memory of it lasted all winter. Number 13. Smoked salmon from the Yukon River. The Han people had been smoking salmon from the Yukon River for thousands of years before the stampeders arrived. When the salmon ran in summer, the fish were caught by the hundreds, split, and smoked over alder fires on racks along the riverbank. The smoked fish was traded to the saloons and sold by the strip. A strip of smoked salmon cost $1. The flesh was red-orange and firm. The smoky flavor was deep and sweet. It was the best thing available in Dawson that did not come from a tin. The Han who sold it had been eating it their entire lives. The stampeders who bought it had never tasted anything like it. Number 12. Bear steak. When a black bear was killed near Dawson, the meat was sold to the highest bidder, which was always a saloon. A bear steak was thick and dark and gamey, and it required long, slow cooking to become tender. Served with boiled potatoes and bread, it cost $5 a plate. The fat was rendered separately and used for frying and baking. A single bear could provide enough meat for 3 nights of service and enough fat to last a month. The miners who ate bear steak in a Dawson saloon were eating the same animal that had fattened itself on the same blueberries that grew along the same creeks where the gold was found. Everything in the Klondike was connected. Number 11. Everclear punch served in a wash tub. For parties and celebrations, saloon keepers filled a wash tub with a mixture of grain alcohol, canned fruit juice, sugar, and whatever else was on hand. Ladles were provided. Cups were optional. The punch was free for the first hour, and $1 a cup after that. Men fell into the wash tub. Men drank from the wash tub. Men woke up beside the wash tub with no memory of the previous evening, and a headache that lasted 3 days. The alcohol content was never measured and never consistent, and the only quality control was whether the man who drank it could still stand. Second pattern break. Here's the economy of the Klondike in a single sentence. Gold was cheap and everything else was expensive. A man could pan $10 worth of gold in a morning and spend it all on breakfast. The saloons understood this better than anyone. They were not in the business of selling food and drink. They were in the business of converting gold into pleasure. Every fried egg, every shot of whiskey, every bottle of champagne was a mechanism for separating a miner from his dust. And the miners cooperated willingly because gold in the Klondike was not money. It was weight. It was the heavy yellow weight of months of frozen labor. And the only way to make that weight feel like freedom was to exchange it for something that tasted, however briefly, like the life they had left behind. Number 10. Bannock with wild berry jam. Bannock baked in a pan, served with jam made from wild cranberries, blueberries, or cloudberries gathered from the surrounding bush. The bannock cost 50 cents. The jam cost $1. Together, they were the sweetest meal available in Dawson for under $2, and they tasted like the land itself. The berries had been gathered by indigenous women and traded or sold at the market. The bannock was made by anyone who had flour. The combination was one of the few meals in Dawson that did not require a supply chain stretching across a continent. Number 9. Caviar for breakfast. This is not a joke. In the winter of 1898, steamboats brought tinned Russian caviar up the Yukon River, and it was sold in the saloons of Dawson City to any miner who could pay. A tin cost $20. Some Dawson residents ate caviar for breakfast alongside champagne, while miners at the next table ate stale bread and lard. The contrast was the defining image of the Klondike: extraordinary wealth beside desperate poverty. Champagne and caviar, 10 feet away from hardtack and coffee. The saloon served both without judgment, because gold does not care where it came from, and neither did Dawson. Number 8. Canned peaches. The most craved food in the Klondike was not steak or whiskey or champagne. It was canned peaches. The sweetness, the syrup, the softness of the fruit after months of hardtack and dried meat. A tin of peaches cost $3 in Dawson, which is over $100 in today's money. Men traded gold dust for canned peaches. Men fought over canned peaches. A miner who opened a tin of peaches in his cabin and ate them with a spoon in the dark was experiencing a moment of pleasure so intense that some of them wrote about it in letters home. The peaches were the thing they missed most. Not family. Not warmth. Peaches. Number 7. Wild game sausages. Enterprising butchers in Dawson ground moose, caribou, and bear meat together with whatever fat and seasoning was available and stuffed the mixture into casings made from animal intestines. The sausages were sold to the saloons and fried on the griddle. 3 sausages and a piece of bread cost $2. The taste varied wildly, depending on the ratio of animals and the creativity of the butcher. Some batches were excellent, some were inedible. All of them were consumed because protein in Dawson was protein, and nobody sent a sausage back. Number 6. Grayling fried in butter. Arctic grayling, a cold water fish with a distinctive sail-like dorsal fin, was caught in the creeks around Dawson and fried in butter when butter was available, or in bacon fat when it was not. A plate of fried grayling cost $3. The fish was delicate and sweet. It fell apart at the touch of a fork. It was the lightest meal in a town that specialized in heavy food. Miners who had been eating beans and dried meat for weeks ordered grayling the way a drowning man reaches for air. The fish reminded them that food could be beautiful. Number 5. Steak and eggs at the Monte Carlo Saloon. The Monte Carlo was one of the grandest saloons on Front Street, with a grand facade, mirrors, plate glass windows, and electric lights powered by a generator that ran on firewood. A steak and eggs breakfast at the Monte Carlo cost $8, which is over $300 in today's money. The steak was moose or caribou, and the eggs were the rarest luxury in the house. The plate was served on a white cloth at a wooden table by a waiter in a vest, and for 5 minutes, a miner covered in mud and frozen sweat could sit in a room with mirrors and electric light and eat a meal that made him feel like the gold had been worth it. Number 4. The Dance Hall Girl Dinner. The wealthiest miners took dance hall girls to dinner at the saloons, and the expected order was the most expensive thing on the menu. Champagne first, then oysters, then steak, then dessert, usually canned fruit or dried apple pie. The total bill for a dinner for 2 could reach $50 or $60, which is over $2,000 in today's money for dinner. The girls were not eating because they were hungry. The miners were not paying because they were generous. Both were performing a transaction in which food was the medium and companionship was the product. The most famous of these girls, Klondike Kate Rockwell, reportedly earned $30,000 in her first year in Dawson. Not from gold, from dinners. Number 3. The Midnight Moose Roast. When a saloon acquired a whole moose, the event was announced, and the roast began at midnight. The moose was butchered. The best cuts were seasoned with salt and whatever spices were available, and roasted on spits and in ovens through the small hours. By 2 in the morning, the saloon was packed. Miners who had been working the creeks for 20 hours came into town for the roast. The slices were carved to order and served with bread, gravy, and whiskey. A plate cost $5. The saloon served until the moose was gone, which was usually by dawn. Nobody slept. Nobody left. The moose roast was the closest thing Dawson had to a feast. Feasts do not happen on a schedule. They happen when the moose walks into range. Number 2. The $1,000 Omelet. Swiftwater Bill Gates, the most flamboyant of the Klondike millionaires, once ordered an omelet made from every egg available in a saloon, cooked with canned oysters and bacon, and served on the finest plate in the house. The bill, by some accounts, exceeded $100 for a single omelet, which is nearly $4,000 in today's money. Gates ate it alone at the bar, while the saloon watched. The omelet was not about hunger. It was about spectacle. In a town where every man was trying to prove that his gold was worth something, Swiftwater Bill proved it by eating the most expensive breakfast in the history of the Canadian frontier and leaving a tip that was larger than most men's claims. Number 1. The sourtoe cocktail. In 1973, a man named Captain Dick Stevenson found a preserved human toe in a cabin near Dawson City. The toe had belonged to a miner named Louis Lycan, who had lost it to frostbite in the 1920s and preserved it in a jar of alcohol. Stevenson brought the toe to the downtown hotel's sourdough saloon and invented a drink. The rules were simple: a shot of whiskey. The toe dropped into the glass. You drink it. The toe must touch your lips. The cocktail has been served continuously since 1973, though the original toe has been replaced multiple times because people kept swallowing it. The current fine for swallowing the toe is $2,500. More than 100,000 people have taken the sourtoe cocktail since it was invented. The drink itself is unremarkable. The toe is the point. It is a blackened, leathery, preserved human toe sitting in a glass of whiskey in a saloon in a town that was built on gold and madness, and the kind of appetite that does not stop at the edge of reason. The sourtoe cocktail is not a meal. It is the final word on a town that serves champagne at $2,300 a bottle, eggs at $77 each, caviar for breakfast, and moose steak at midnight. In Dawson City, everything was for sale, including apparently the privilege of pressing a dead man's frostbitten toe against your lips and calling it a cocktail. That is the Klondike. That has always been the Klondike. Wild enough to build a city where no city should exist. Wild enough to charge $3 for a piece of bread. And wild enough to put a human toe in a glass of whiskey and dare you to drink it. Look up the sourtoe cocktail. It is real. The downtown hotel in Dawson City still serves it. More than 100,000 people have done it. Then think about the men and women who ate these meals in 1898 in a city made of wood and canvas on a frozen river at the edge of the world. And ask yourself whether any meal you have ever eaten was as wild as a fried egg that cost $77, or a bottle of champagne that cost $2,300, or a donut fried in bear fat, or a dance hall dinner that cost $2,000, or a cocktail that contains an actual human toe. Share which one shocked you the most in the comments. I want to know if anyone has done the sourtoe cocktail. I want to know if anyone else knew that eggs were the most expensive food in the Klondike. Because these are not just meals, they are proof that when gold comes out of the ground, the rules of food go in after it, and they never come back.